Welcome everyone. The topic for the day is KPI documentation and the data collection. So basically the key performance indicators, what are the data that needs to be collated and probably reported. So this is what the recording process will be all about within the purview of this presentation. Remember, audit is a process of quality improvement that seeks to improve the outcomes through a systematic review in terms of cares against the explicit criteria of implementation of change. So something where there is a standard which we have already established at the beforehand, and what are the actual things that have happened or as in the performance is concerned. If there are any gaps, in between these two, we need to analyze them and we need to close that gap so that we achieve to the standards or explicitly improve upon the standards. In brief, audit provides a method of systematic reflecting on and reviewing the practices. So let us understand what are the KPIs, why are they very important. Please understand, first and foremost is to it helps in assessing and ensuring whether the healthcare system practices are effective or not. Absolutely, the health of the organization that comes under the purview. This is what we're looking at it in terms of cost effectiveness. Are we reducing the cost? Are we demonstrating the system efficiencies and development thereby? We need to identify the good practices always and benchmark them according to the industry standard. If it is not been according to the benchmark practices, we strive to improve upon it. Definitely, it provides an avenues for training and development, helps to ensure better use of resources, thereby increased use of being a bit much more a lean and a mean organization that comes around it. We need to understand this benefit altogether. So another utilizations of KPIs will be the optimum utilization of resources. Definitely yes, and at the end of it, it is where we build up a good, healthy relationship, a good, vibrant, transparent communication, and in short, our overall environment is very conducive for all the employees and the customers and the other stakeholders in between. It's a conducive environment that we create around it, and that is the importance of having a key performance indicators in place. You remember, KPIs reflect and demonstrate the improvement in the service delivery. Some of your customers may be annoyed, some may be comparing, some may be frightened, some might be shouting or probably displaying anger altogether, some might be altogether not being having an approval limit. So basically, what I'm trying to tell it to you, key performance indicators will demonstrate whether your product or the services that you are meting out or dishing out to the end customer, whether they have been thrilled by it or not. This determines their proficiency and probably the viability of the organization in the longest run of the situation. So we need to understand and demonstrate an improvement, reduce grievances altogether. Once we start reducing grievances and enhancing the improvement in the service quality and customer satisfaction that we are looking about it. So areas for KPI measures, we need to understand there are broadly three measures: structures, process, and outcomes. Structures are the availability of the organization's resources and personnel thereof. Remember, when we are talking about resources, it might be a raw material. When we are talking about resources, it can be human resource also, human beings also, the employees also, the personnel that we are talking around it. And then comes the activities which have been undertaken within an organization so that it transfers those input into the process and comes with the finished products or the service that goes around it. So what are the activities that needs to be taken? This is broadly under the classified under the processes. Let us come with the outcomes as such. And remember, all the effect of activities is towards the service users or the end users of the organization product, be it a product or the service that we're looking into it. If they are happy, if they are satisfied, if the customers are thrilled, if there is a sense that this is a responsible organization, a sense of well-being being received out there, the organization will be viable, profitable, and long lasting in due courses of time. So, basic areas of KPIs would be structure, process, and outcome. Been elaborated out here. Remember, the key to successful measuring of our performances lies in the effective data collections and analysis, providing evidences and conclusion thereby. We need to understand altogether this the key. Remember, the key is to measure performances. The key is to get the data, analyze those data, and providing evidence based decisions. That is what the ulterior motives would be all about. It is all about the performance through the data collection, analysis, and coming to a pertinent decision. So measuring performances, all everything which has been there about it. The heart of the audit is the measurement of the care and against the standard criteria. I have already said about the standards and the actual care might be completely driven altogether, and then the care what has been held upon it. So we need to understand what has been, how do we measure performances altogether. Each audit criteria should have an expected level of performance or the target assigned to it. This is very important as far as measuring your performances, whether you are reaching your targets, whether you're reaching your objective or the goals or not. That will let us know it. Steps in measuring performances are all about data collection and data analysis, drawing conclusions from the analyzed data and the reporting thereof. So there are four methods that we which we deal into it. Those are data collections, data analysis, drawing conclusions, and data reporting. That is the measurements of performance would be all about it. Let us begin with the data collection. Remember, we need to have collect data directly from the sources. Users groups has to be included every time at the source. The workers needs to be taken care of into consideration. This is what we are talking about it. We have the time period that needs to be set in motion. We cannot have different points of data collection. It is has to be uniform and simultaneously if possible. Why? Because then it may starts to come up and starts to shape up a meaning, gives a meaning. The data becomes completely raw and it lets us analyze what are the things that we all are doing right or wrong. So that is what time period is all about. So data collection choice. Now this is something which you need to understand into what kind of audit you are going across it. And based upon that, you need to design your data variable and scientifically design the questionnaires. If the data is of secondary forms, then use them to the extent that keeping in mind. But if it is not secondary, it is primarily, that means you are sourcing the data directly from the sources altogether, then you have to fund those primary collection. The method of choice, the type of data required is depending upon the audit question. Remember, this is one of the best method needs to be go around. This will determine whether we go for the secondary data or the primary data as the case might be, right? So the aim of data collection is to enable comparison of the current practice against the audited standard. Therefore it should facilitate this comparison. I have mentioned it accordingly out here. Is your primary data, secondary data. Remember, data that the auditors collect would be primary data, the reference point that comes around it, and the secondary data will be collected by somebody else, and you are sourcing or basing your inferences based on those data. So remember, primary data is the most pertinent and the most relevant one and should be utilized at all point of time. Definitely secondary sources of data would be a good beginning, good reference point. So questions to be answered for planning data collection. So what kind of data that you require is you need to understand the quantitative or the qualitative part of it. What data items are needed to use to show whether the performance is up to a mark? Have it met it or not? Which data sources to find the data around it? Which are the sources that you're going to go around it? Will it to be redesigned or probably will it to be noted down, curtailed, pruned down the data collection tool? That needs to be understood. Will you need to collect data prospectively or retrospectively? As in the event which is going on prospectively, or at the beginning of the event, or let's say after the event have passed happened altogether retrospectively that we are talking about it. You have to determine the size of the population. If in case the size of the population is very huge, then what kind of sampling process that you're going to go around it. Duration of the process, if it is manually done, electronically done, how do you collect the data, how long will you take to collect the required data altogether, and who will be collecting the data. Remember, how will you ensure the data quality in terms of accountability, viability and reliability is of most important thing. So, data items. Let us understand what is data items. Relevance to the aims and the objectives of the audit. That is what the data item should be. It should be adequate for the study. So, you cannot base a questionnaire, you cannot come to a conclusion with less than 20 or 30 data sets. Data responses absolutely is not viable in case that population is around 1,000 odd people. Based on 20 handful of 20 responses, you cannot come with a conclusion. You have to make at least 20 or 30% of the population to be surveyed, covered up, so that you come to some sort of a conclusions, right? But it will be better if you have cover at least 50 or 60% of the population in case in case the population set is very huge. So you need to understand, define the evidences thereof, the criteria that is mentioned, define the method of collection for each of the item, and what I've been saying it time and again, it is your benchmark or the standards vis-a-vis your data that has going to go around it. Look what has been shown in the pick that I've given it to you. Avoid or exclude duplications altogether. This is what we are looking into it. Identifying everything clearly as far as the data item is very pertinent. The objectives of the audit, the adequateness of the study, the what is to be included, what is to be excluded, what are the sampling method that you are going around it, what are the evidences that you are depending, and the criteria there are. These are the data items that need to be taken into consideration. So, data collection methods, what are they? There are only two methods which are known out here. One is a qualitative, and the other one will be quantitative. In terms of quantitative, everything relates to the number, test, counting, and measures. In terms of quality, it is all about words, image, conversations, observation, photographs. That is there. So, audit mainly involves in gathering quantitative data that reflects the actual number of what has been measured against the standards or the benchmark thereby. So, data collection through quantitative methods are often believed to yield more objective and accurate information because they were collected using the standardized methods can be replicated altogether. This is what you're looking into it. Unlike qualitative data can be analyzed using sophisticated statistical technique then and there. This is what we are going to let you know all the time, every time. The sources of data for an audit should be specific and agreed by the audit team. This is very true. Absolutely, yes. This should be responsibly sourced. Most importantly, this cannot be vague data. This cannot be based on somebody's perception. This has to be real and raw data. The sources specified should provide the most relevant, most of the data, as in the case might be all about it. This is what we are talking about it. Now, relevance and routinely collected raw data from an existing source should be used for the purpose of audit. Avoid duplications of information and work. This allows repeated data collection and re-auditing altogether. So that is what we are looking as far as data sources are concerned. Right now, collect data from where? Number one, from the computer registers that comes around it, because they will be time stamped and time marked. Then probably review of the content of the medical records or any of the records that goes around it. Data collection sheets that comes around in terms of raw tabulated on the Excel sheet and hard copies, and data reports from different units that has been involved. This is what we are looking into it. So, with data sources, we come to the next standards of data collection. Be careful of data collection. Choose a topic which does not entail too much of a data. This is what we are looking into it. Otherwise, it becomes exhaustive. In case if the data set that you're collecting is becoming too broad, can we prune it down? Can we prune it down? And probably we can handle this amount of data. And probably again you can have another methods of collecting this part of the data altogether. So time span 1, time span 2, then come time span 3. Probably similarly you can go for time span 4 and things. So you fragment the data as many times that can be there available, instead of collecting a whole data sets as in the whole set altogether. This become very difficult. Remember, sampling has to be either systematic or random, and it should not be biased altogether. Always collect essential information, that is what is which is pertinent to the audit. Use computer based data collection from manuals, forms, and so on and so forth. Remember, use of other staff delegates. Do not do all the work yourself. Always delegate. Ensure that people are there working for you and people understand what is the very objective of the audit. Set a deadline thereby. So data collection tools, I'm sure about it. The data has to be relevant with the objective, expected performance level that comes around it. We have to work about the data's time and again the definitions which has been mentioned. Acronym jargons should be avoided as far as possible. There should be too much space for expected recording of the data. Question should be episode specific, absolutely related to a specific episode altogether. We will talk about the clarity of the format of the answers. Limit the use of free text to the open question, and audit with qualitative elements in free text is difficult to code. Definitely yes. If possible, go for something where this can be rated altogether in sense that it can be ranked 0 to 4 or 0 to 6. So filters should be used if possible. If there is a particular answer, can you go back to the review question of question number 4 or question number 3, whichever would have been the data item should be presented in a logical sequence, so that the person collecting the data to skip backwards and forwards every now and then. That should not be the case. It should go with one sequences altogether, and it should build on it as the case might be. Quality, the data collected should be reliable, should be valid. The validity of the data is to the degree by which it is supposed to measure. This will tell me how valid the document data is all about. Whereas reliability of the data is the measurement which gives the result that are consistent. That is the two different things that needs to be ascertained. Remember, validity is what it's supposed to measure, whereas reliability, to what extent they have been consistent, the reliabilities which you have been going to go around it. So that's what the data collected quality is concerned. So who collects the data? Depending upon the audit, data might be collected by more than a person, a different person, a group of person. There should be no confusion over terminologies. Please do not use any jargon, technical terms as often as possible. In addition, everybody who is involved in collecting data should know the responsibilities or the various elements that they are collecting data, as in what, how, where data has to be. So let us come to the next step is of data analysis to compare actual practices and performances against the agreed standard. Remember, the audit must be collated, it must be analyzed, and certain decision has to be arrived. The basic aim of data analysis to convert the collection of data into useful information. I said we are trying to come to a decisions as such with the with a certain degree of compliance. Steps in data analysis: number first would be to collect data, definitely yes. Then probably to transfer them into computer based on the summary sheets, spreadsheets, database for interpretation. Code the data if required. There are many programs that is available, there are many software which is available. In case if you are not able to go around it, we can use Python, or for that matter R as a software research statistical data that comes around it. Arrange the data as in as far as possible in a logical and fast fashion, let's say from smaller to bigger or A to Z, and so on and so forth, for time stamped it. So check on the data for errors and rectify original sources. How do we interpret? Now this is very interesting. The type of data analysis depend on the type of data being collected. Remember, this can range from simple averages to percentages to sophisticated statistical techniques, as in correlation or Cronbach alpha regression that comes around it. So we have the common interpretations are done using count, mean, median, mode, percentage, rates, standard deviation. interpretation is displayed in graphs and charts depending on what exactly has been measured. In audit, the numerator and denominator should be clearly defined to each measures. Remember, numerator is the total number of within the denominator group that meets the criteria. So that is what the numerator is all about. It is a part, it is a subset of the very part of the group that comes around it. So this becomes a numerator, and this is the denominator, which includes the denominator. So applicable cases for the criteria comes under the participant. So data interpretation and the reporting usage. How do we use the graph has been shown in the pic out here. So this is where the rate has been plotted to run a chart or a control chart. We can have percentage more effectively represented in a pie chart. Bar chart and histograms are good for frequency distribution. So the number of time it is going to happen in the number of things. Pareto's chart gives me an 80-20 analysis as well histogram, as in 80% of the time probably is the reasons why certain things happen only 20%. Similarly, 20% of the events happen because of the 80% of the reasons that comes around it. So it can helps me prioritize the 80-20 rules of Pareto. The scattered diagram is to identify correlation that might exist between the quality of the characteristic. Fishbone is another mascot that comes around it as far as data interpretation is concerned. So we need to understand about data interpretation, and this can be graphically represented on the scale. So I would like to wind up with the summary. Remember, any presentation of results should to be to maximize the impact of the audit on the audience, on the impressionable mind, even if how learned they are all about, to sensitize them and to stimulate discussion among the support action planning. Audit enhances the effective and logical decision making process, as in to prioritize certain areas of governance. With I would like to end this particular presentation. Thank you for watching this video.